Okay, great. Hi, everybody. Hi again. This is a conversation we're having in Caesura with Peter Shear. We're very happy to have Peter here and happy that he accepted the invitation. I'm just going to introduce very briefly Caesura and then let Patrick introduce Peter. And we can just kind of start after that. So Caesura is an independent art and criticism publication founded in 2016. We publish visual art, poetry, prose, and music, as well as criticism and commentary from artists and writers that recognize the task of art today and the need for something new. So we have organized critique sessions, online screenings, art history courses, and now these conversations, interview series that we kind of aim to have really an informal conversation with artists that are doing interesting work that we think is really good. And we just want to know more about what they do and how they think about their work. We have had a print issue that came last year on September that featured work from different artists and also writers like Roberto Calasso, Will Alexander, Rosemary Waldrop, and we have a forthcoming issue on the spring that will have a nice first translation of Beckett art criticism piece and really other like great writings. So keep an eye on that. And now just Patrick.
Yeah, so Peter Shear is a painter living and working in Bloomington, Indiana. He's had some recent shows at Koki Arts in Tokyo, the Fortnight Institute in New York, and the Castle Gallery in Los Angeles. Peter's going to be in a group show that I'm curating at Make Room Gallery in Los Angeles in January. That'll open, I think, on January 19th, and there'll be more information from Make Room on that in the coming month or so. But yeah, we're excited to have Peter here to talk a little bit about his practice, and yeah, let's get into it. I think the way we've been starting all of these so far is just by asking, about your experience sort of becoming an artist. What sort of were, some of the early formative moments, that you think led you on the path to sort of where you are now? Maybe some of maybe there were influential teachers, maybe it was certain experiences with works of art. But how did you find yourself becoming an artist?
Sure. Well, thank you for having me in to talk, Gabriel and Patrick. I'll try to go through this quickly. As a kid, I always sort of drew when I was sort of an adolescent. I was kind of cartooning. At the same time, being in junior high, they kind of sit you down in front of the still life and they give you a Conte crayon and ask you to, to render it correctly. And because I, didn't really have much facility at that point, I feel like I didn't have a lot of encouragement, and I feel like I just sort of, felt like I was frustrated and maybe not an artist because that skill set didn't kind of come naturally to me. Although I spent, a lot of time just kind of like freaking out with art supplies on my own. In the 90s, I feel like there was like an ascendant interest in movies and film, and there were little video cameras, and I started running around with like a video camera and friends and sort of making little movies and things like that. And that's sort of like how I got the art out, maybe. When I was in high school, I was involved in a high school newspaper. I thought I would sort of go into journalism. I became interested in the graphic design aspect. And that sort of took over for a while. I feel like even now there's kind of like a strong grid undergirding what I do. And like the idea of you'd be a graphic designer, that was kind of like an approachable, saleable idea to someone in the in the suburbs. I grew up in Northwest Indiana, about an hour from Chicago, in a town called Valparaiso. And I was noodling around in Photoshop and kind of like making digital collage and things like that. I don't know. In my early 20s, the idea of like making artwork, or like, as a vocation, is something that I might possibly do, not to sort of make a living, but more like, I don't know, you sort of like make some things and you think like, maybe I made some art, and sometimes you do and sometimes you don't. But that experience was so exciting that it was enough to sort of keep me going. I don't know, in my 20s, I made kind of astringent drawings with like a charcoal pencil. They were sort of like born out of like maybe a cartoon, things like that. And gradually I had like opportunities to show work in little local group shows. I was taking classes just as a, not as a student of the Art Institute, but they have a Oxbow, which is like a summer camp, and it's also a residency program, I believe, in the fall. But kind of going there and meeting some people and some other students who were sort of like more immersed in it, made it feel like it was more approachable, and like I knew more than I thought I did, or was sort of treated more like a peer than I thought I might be. Imposter syndrome kind of runs through my life and maybe my work. I don't know. I had an opportunity in the form of an invitation from an artist named Julie Torres in the 2000s, 2010s to go be part of like a group show in Brooklyn during the Bushwick Open Studios. They were doing that, I think, in the spring, maybe in May at that time. And the experience of going to New York for the first time and meeting artists was further like a catalyst for, okay, this feels kind of right. I was starting to make paintings in acrylic that look a little bit like what I do now. You just like have some invitations to show, and some people kind of give you a thumbs up. And I always thought, I would go to art school, or that was like the appropriate thing to do. That's what you're supposed to do. Go and get like a blue chip pedigree from like 5 or 6 different schools maybe. And I thought that is sort of what would make me an artist. And for whatever reason, financial, maybe like depression, I could just like never get it together to, I don't know, get myself into art school, which is for the best. But I kind of, I was so concerned with that. It seems like everything I thought I was doing wrong turned out to be like approximately okay. And living in Indiana and working here, I've developed weird painting muscles, because like, the overhead is low and you can sort of like work a little bit. And I'm fortunate enough to kind of, send the work elsewhere. And it's, kind of like voted into confidence by other artists and institutions and galleries. In 2017, I started working with Formative Institute, my gallery in New York, and did a show that year, my first solo show in New York that was well received. And again, just more encouragement. And I sort of feel, as I did then, that it was sort of like, this was like a going thing, and that I guess I was being treated like a painter, so I guess I was. So that's right around the present. How was that?
Yeah.
I do want to have a question, just building that.
Mm-hmm.
I just wanted to ask, you go from, we were doing some videos and you were doing drawing all the time and sort of comic picture things.
Yeah.
And how did you find yourself like moving into like abstraction, into the kind of work that you're doing today, and you were doing on the first show that you had a fortnight?
Mm-hmm.
Like, how did you find sort of your interest in abstraction coming in? Like, when did that happen?
Well, I mean, so I'm not abstracting from anything. And it seems like what I do, I kind of like move the painting around and park it like at a busy intersection of like maybe like visual references or cues or ideas that people can hang on the work or store in the work. And you know, it's not reverse engineered to be that way, but it just sort of has come out that way, which is sort of like enough for me that it's sort of working. I don't know. I mean, I like a big visual hit. You know, the work has to be received immediately, and you sort of spend your time walking around with it. It's like I think about how long I'm ever in front of like my favorite works of art, or if I've even ever seen them in person, but they kind of live in your memory. So the idea of what's like an indelible image, you know, probably like, you know, received through, you know, the economy of like a cartoon or a political cartoon, or still a film, or, you know, a photograph, just like enough to, you know, I'm not interested in, you know, telling a story more so than creating an opportunity for, I don't know, kind of like a reset, basically. I see a lot of work that kind of flatters me. You know, I sort of understand certain things about it, or it's ironic, or you know, critique, but I kind of like work that makes me feel not stupid, but just a little bit like just sort of refreshed and like uncertain of it. And that's sort of how, you know, as you know, a viewer of my own work, I'm never really certain what's good and what's bad. And oftentimes the work that I leave the studio at the end of the day that I'm excited about, you know, I come in the next day and it's dead on the floor or the wall. And the work that is sort of like nervous making is the work that kind of, you know, outliers tend to be folded into, you know, main concern. But, you know, everyone's looking at their phones, everyone's scrolling, blah, blah, blah. But it's such a, you know, visual glut. And so what is going to be arresting? And I think, you know, a lot of my education has just sort of been online, you know, listening to other artists, but also just looking at everything kind of all at once. And it sort of, it goes in and it shows up in the work. And I'm kind of tickled by that, and the idea of, you know, like the mind is a tool for organizing if you just get out of the way. In my instance, I've sort of found a way to work that is appropriate to that. It's sort of like what I can do. There's so many things I can't, but I feel like if you can, you know, take your skill set and torque it in a certain way and find an audience, then you'll be set, as long as you enjoy what you're doing. It would be trouble if I didn't, but yeah, I mean, I love what I do. It's the most fun. Oh,
I guess I didn't know.
Sorry.
I was waiting to see if Patrick had a question, but obviously it is always interesting for me when I see somebody's work. You know, the resonance of the works of the past, that is not like a copying, it's not like an imitation, but the
right.
fact that they seem to hold themselves with the same kind of strength, if we were to speak about something kind of abstract. And I don't know, it's something that what you said that made me feel that, and made me curious about you know, the kind of work that you look at, the kind of artist that interests you. Obviously, you are an extremely famous figure in like Instagram, online kind of thing, with the images that you post. That a lot of the time, perhaps I getting now from artists that I thought I liked, but you know, you see like kind of known work from Corot, in your Instagram that are like, it's just incredible. And I never thought about it that way. But the way that you curate them together, they bring something new. And so I did have that kind of, questions about the artists that you look at, but also the way that, the way that you engage with them, the kind of the interest, what interests you in them, what you look at them, how you find these things, but also how does that, expresses a kind of taste that you have for painting.
I don't know. I mean, like what I'm posting there is just what I'm interested in. It's just intuitive, and it sort of has use value to me as a painter. And Instagram, maybe initially, and still it's sort of like a good placeholder for these things. Like I'm not collaging them and putting them into a book anymore. They can all just sort of be on my phone, at any time. And the more they sort of stacked up and I would look at them in the grid, the more interested I became in the idea. I said, like, I'm sort of like, there's themes that kind of come and go, or colors or compositions. And didn't plan it that way. I don't know if anyone else, cares, but I'm interested in, yeah, I mean, I just like the way things link together and sort of disparate images, or maybe different notions about what an image could be across time. So yeah, I mean, in it all, I mean, it's all sort of fodder for what I'm doing, I suppose. Maybe fodder isn't a great word, but I don't know what a better one would be. I mean, I was surprised that there was an audience for it, but I guess people like to look at Milton Avery paintings on their phones is sort of what I've figured out after 7 or 8 years. And then I dropped my own work into the mix, and it informs what I'm doing, because I'm sort of all over the place a little bit, or some paintings are very stripped down, some paintings are more juicy, or have more of they look like a landscape or whatever, and maybe they are, if you like, but it was a way of getting my work in front of people. And so again, everyone's got their phone. How can one participate when you live in Bloomington, Indiana, when I'm not circulating in New York, when people don't know who I am? How do you educate people about the work? How do you connect to other artists? And I think, like, part of the job of the artist is just, find a way to be maybe generous, but just to sort of move energy around. And there's a number of ways to do that. People, teach, or operate spaces, or finance things for people. But sort of what I could offer is this sort of lookbook. And I hear from people that say they didn't know an aspect of an artist's work, or they didn't know of someone, and or people that I enjoy their work, and they've gotten shows, or they've sold work due to the exposure. And that is, I don't know, I don't think that kind of gets any better. And I'm an artist. I like the attention, and it's it's kind of problematic. You're sort of like, you can't you can't not pay attention to, like, what engages people. I think you just sort of have to harness your own instinct about a piece, and even if it has maybe less of a stir than other pieces, then it's been like a good practice to sort of, like, I stand by this work, even though people maybe didn't like it as much, or something like that. Yeah.
So I wanted to ask about, getting more specifically into the way that you're relating to art history, to paintings, and like what you're sort of like picking up or like getting out of them. You know, because I've sort of thought a lot about like this like strange sort of like I don't know, like this sort of return of history that sort of seems to be happening. You know, I had this experience when I was in art school myself of sort of moving from trying to do like conceptual art to like studying 19th century French painting, because to me that actually that felt more pressing, more urgent, more substantial, and sort of more related to what I was sort of experiencing in the present than, you know, whatever conceptual art I was trying to do before. And, you know, I feel like when you're sort of talking about Instagram and educating your audience and sort of the opportunity that it affords you to sort of like deal with art history in a different kind of way, to kind of like accumulate it, and like through that, like pick up on certain things. And so, you know, I feel like in your paintings, like the kind of like visual cues or references that you sort of talked about initially, like those are sort of very like oblique things, you know, when I really think about them, like the way that they, you know, you can sort of feel how they have this kind of connection or relationship to various paintings in the past.
Mm-hmm.
But, you know, the actual sort of thing that you're picking up on is something that's like, you know, very immaterial. So, you know, I'm just curious, sort of like what are those like, what are the aspects of paintings that you're sort of thinking about and like finding yourself sort of drawn to, or sort of what, you know, how do you feel yourself sort of channeling that history in your own work?
I think I pay more attention to composition of a picture more than anything else, and that's sort of what is the most exciting, and that's sort of, I feel like, what fixes in my mind more so than color or I don't know, context. And it's sort of like the work is sort of stripped of context. You just sort of are left with the images on Instagram, which for me is just sort of perfect. And it's not hierarchical in a way, and it doesn't have the, you know, the friends and enemies of such and such. It's just it's just the image, which, I don't know, for me that's enough. And obviously, you know, my own work is pretty graphic, and it kind of lends itself almost to the format. It's pretty small. I think people know that, relative to other painting or other abstraction, certainly, that's going on. But you know, as far as the variety of work, or the artists who I'm drawn, I mean, like the drawn to the most, you know, the best thing you can possibly do is learn how to change your mind, as an artist and as a viewer. And there's a lot of people who I've come around to who maybe I kind of rejected out of hand, or, you know, I wasn't educated. I didn't learn how to look at the work, and there's all sorts of artists like that. I mean, like I was in the Met a few weeks ago, and I, you know, the one artist that I've sort of like come back, I'm more excited about than anyone else, is like, you know, fucking Renoir. And you know, it flies in the face of taste and everything, but oh man, the dude could paint, and I just love it. And you know, I wouldn't have sort of accepted that, or I wouldn't have admitted that publicly, maybe 5 years ago. But again, it's just like I didn't have a taste for it. You sort of like what you like, and I like conceptual art too, and I like, you know, the stupid television too, and I like, you know, advertisements for fragrance or handbags. It's all sort of, you know, it's all sort of about the same. How do you you know, how do you reach someone? How do you live in the memory, and kind of orbit around an image or an idea? You know, you can sort of change around it, or if something's strong enough to be kicked around, then it is worth my consideration, I think. If something kind of comes down to us, 300-400 years from the past, then I don't know. I guess I have a lot of time for it, more so than on maybe other art forms. It enters into your consciousness like right away, and I feel like art stays. It has like a longer shelf life, I think, and to see, a woman in a Rembrandt painting, and to think it looks like she was, she was on TikTok yesterday or something like that. It's very heartening, and you feel like, you're communicating with the dead. And you feel like maybe a little less lonely, or you feel this, I don't know, you feel part of a lineage, I suppose. And to be able to plug in to this thing that is very mysteriously renewable source of energy, a painting, is something that I kind of come back to. It's kind of miraculous, and I don't understand how that can be, but I do know that happens from time to time. And yeah, I feel like it's the most fun you can have. Because the way that I work, it kind of sneaks up on me. I'm kind of like backing out of the work almost. And there's like kind of like maybe intrusive thoughts bumping into me, which I welcome. But suddenly there's an image, or there's something that pushes back a little bit, that's arrested on the surface. And if I have the presence of mind to stop, and to look, or to set things aside and go have some coffee or whatever, I think like there's something of that immediacy that that stays kind of locked in, that seals the freshness in, and then the viewer kind of comes along and finishes right like the sentence, or adds something, or says it looks like a squirrel, or whatever. Just to get someone to invest a little bit of energy in what you're doing is almost impossible. I don't know, but I find it heartening that people that have advanced degrees and are really like steeped in, art history, or poetry or whatever, can kind of like dig the work, but also people that are just sort of kind of bumping into it on Instagram maybe, or coworkers that I've had that have nothing to do at all with, contemporary painting or discourse, for God's sakes, the discourse. But yeah, I mean, I feel like, again, that really feels like it's working when all sorts of, there's a low level of entry, and you can kind of go up and up and up. What do you want to talk about now?
I was thinking, I mean, the idea that, what do we, as an artist, what you want people to have, what the experience you want to inspire on people in the paintings, like that kind of question. It's usually like strange when you think about somebody who does like, landscape painting or something more like that, somebody can relate on the real life. It may seem to be more like immediate, like it may seem that everybody can relate, but actually that may also be obscure the fact that what you are looking at is a sort of expression that is produced through, you work in this composition, you work in these colors, you're doing this or that. And it's interesting when you say, it does have a kind of level of engaging, even though these images may seem a bit more obscure and more abstract, and they, you may have a kind of, it doesn't seem that immediate as a kind of photograph. Still, people can, there is a different kind of engagement that is meant to produce, a different kind of feeling. And it did make me think about, or it did make the question for me about what you think, just the way you work on the paintings,
Mm-hmm.
the kind of like the kind of, I mean, a lot of painters used to tell me they just have the pictures around for a while and then they keep working on them if something else could come, and different kind of ways of working with these objects that at the end you never really know what they are gonna communicate to somebody, but you have a kind of impression of an open-ended circumstance. Just kind of your process on working these images. I think I kind of tangled myself around that question, but I hope you kind of got a little bit of what it's trying to think.
I don't know. Are you? I think I got a little lost myself. Is it a question about process or finish, or I mean, yeah.
Mm-hmm. I guess both. I mean, with paintings like this, how do you know when the image is done? When a painting that sometimes may seem very simple or not,
Right.
like how do you end up like realizing that? Yeah.
Yeah. Well, oftentimes I don't realize it for days or weeks, because the work is small and I can kind of turn it around and check it out at some later time. I don't feel I'm like pretty good at not. I don't know about like overworking, but I feel like when I got to a place where I allowed myself to sort of flip the canvas around, 90 degrees or 180 degrees, and that could, so like, what if that was the final gesture? That was hard to do. But it sort of opened up, I don't know, some possibility that the work could be a little bit more, I don't know, loose and insouciant, or that it wasn't all about me. I kind of sit down and, I have some like bright idea about a painting or a great idea, but when I sit down to, execute, the idea usually kind of falls away. So when I'm looking at, a Cézanne, and I can sort of, it's a landscape, of course, or, some apples, but you can sort of see the decisions that went into the work, and you can sort of see the placement of the brush strokes and the intelligence behind that and the spontaneity maybe behind that, and how he is sort of jumping over all these lasers to get to a place that was probably a little bit beyond himself. And I think those are the artists, and that's sort of what I aspire to in my own work. So sometimes I think like, well, I can't take full responsibility for a painting because it's kind of like a group effort, and I'm allowing myself to sort of like borrow maybe like motifs or ideas or compositions, because like not in a conscious way, but things just sort of show up, or people roll by the painting and be like, Gottlieb. And it's like, oh, of course, how could I be so foolish as to not see the Gottlieb in the work? But, there it is. And for a long time, people making non-representational work, there was like a note, like an aspect of like I don't know, you couldn't use the lozenge, or you couldn't use the drip. It's like proprietary or something like that. And now like no one gives a shit. Abstract paintings aren't going to scandalize anyone. So you can kind of like take different visual cues and just sort of like enjam them and maybe create a spark or create something new. And that's sort of what I'm interested in doing in my own work. And I feel like I sort of like cultivate a territory over here and then kind of try to go off in the other direction to see like, well, like what if you challenge a notion of whatever? Does the other work hold up? Can you do two at a time? And I think like maybe there's an idea that you should have a kind of a signature or a brand. I don't know, maybe I don't think people really think that anymore, but it was hard for me to kind of acclimate to that way of working. But once I did, I found that you can always kind of go back and retrieve things that you've lost, and it expands out as opposed to in. When I was in like around 2005, 2004, I started painting like, naval signal flags. You know what those look like? They look like a, Ellsworth Kelly or whatever. And I got so much pleasure from making these gouache on paper paintings. And so, there was the image, and there was the meaning, and there was the language behind it. And I thought, I'll just do these for the rest of my life. I really found it, it just, things get boring if you know what you're going to do when you go into the studio, or I get bored. It suits a lot of people, and but it's sort of, I kind of like to be surprised, or suddenly there's a painting, and that's sort of what I'm afforded by working the way I'm working. And I don't know. I mean, like I remember, like, Tuttle is an important artist for me, and someone who sort of like had the idea that, you come to the work with like a high degree of seriousness, but like maybe you're not going to work. You don't have to like push that hard. You don't have to like strain that hard. You don't have to like fill, you don't have to put everything you need someone to know about the work into the work. You can just, it can be fragments. It can be like it can be like a cup of tea, as opposed to, a turkey dinner or whatever. And that was, I don't know, that kind of suited my personality, my manner of working, my skill set, right? Yeah, I don't know. Did that touch on your question? I don't even know.
Well, I think that was really nice, and also I don't remember. I think that the question was very lost into things. So I think that your answer was really good. I did like something that you said, which is that, the kind of not having a signature style, but actually the idea that you really have when you practice is that you look back at a painting that you had and may teach you what the next painting is. And it doesn't really become a brand, but it's learning from what you do.
Mm-hmm.
And it can be very expensive. I feel like it does give the necessity of the kind of, it does express like a feeling maybe of like you want to keep working, you want to keep making work, which is you kind of self-made it through like just making paintings. You like want to make another one, and you look at the work that you have.
Yeah, I mean, like I like the idea that the work isn't all good. You sort of like, I don't trust artists that don't make some bad work. I think like the trick is to to edit out the bad work, or to suppress it, or to go back into it. But like the work has to be sturdy enough to get to the next piece. And it's like, maybe a wobbly stone that you're jumping across. But some paintings are more fulsome than others. Some are just like a little bit of a blank almost, or some are just like a few consonants, and some have like maybe a bit more of like a a koan or whatever, and maybe a few of them are short stories, maybe like Lydia Davis, very, very short stories. But yeah, I don't know, you sort of like have to make something not new, but you have to, it has to feel new to me. And I feel like if I'm excited about what I'm doing, and I do it for long enough, then someone eventually will kind of come along and look over my shoulder. And that's sort of, in a way, that's sort of what's happened, despite not being, not living in New York or LA or, Berlin, whatever, and not having gone to art school. There's like a lot of things I didn't know how to do, but you can sort of like garage band it for a while, and that's enough. Not forever, but you can, you can get yourself going, you can get yourself rolling, and you accumulate some skills along the way. I feel like I'm a better painter than I was 5-10 years ago. and I think like you just have to do it, and things get weird after 10 or 20 years. I feel so fortunate to not be brand new necessarily every time, to kind of come in a middle, and there's a language that's been established, and there's like a viewership, whatever, that's been established, and you can kind of almost use that as another art supply, that kind of surprise, or like, did you know, if you accepted this, will you accept this? You know, and of course I'm the first one to sort of be challenged, I suppose, by that. But yeah, I don't know.
I think it's maybe a good time to start looking at some of the paintings.
Yeah.
I think that would be nice.
Okay, let's do that.
Gabriel will pull them up, because yeah, I want to talk about sort of some of the specific, like, I don't know, like the visual phenomena that you're sort of capturing, or the kind of like, you know, I get the feeling from your work that it sort of has this kind of like, you know, sort of like I mentioned before, this kind of like oblique character.
Okay. Yeah.
So like there's like the Satie composition called like you know, things seen from left to right without glasses. And it, you know, there's almost like that sort of like aspect to some of your paintings where they, you know, there's like the sort of like what's happening visually is sort of so minimal, but still sort of enough to sort of conjure like a vision of something like beyond what's just there.
Yeah.
So, you know,
Well, you know, yeah, you just don't need that much, and you can like leave space for other people or other ideas. Yeah, you mentioned Satie, and yeah, I named a painting Furniture Music after one of his compositions, which is just like an adorable title. But I feel like there's something of the, I don't know, the values of his work, if not the, you know, received, if not the work itself. But I feel like I can take, you know, from music, I can take from like dense poetry. I mean, I was interested in, you know, I'm not a poet, and I'm not a very, you know, literate person, but I am impressed and fascinated with how you can, you know, squeeze so much emotion and idea and history into, you know, 100 words, something like that, or less. And I feel like that's something that I kind of aspire to in the work. Or
right, like sometimes I feel like, you know, it almost feels like you're like isolating like something that you saw in a painting, or like, you know, that there's like this, you know, there's just sort of these like moments that you're sort of like zoning in on or keying in on, you know, that typically sort of,
yeah,
I tend to get like, you know, or you know, I think there are things that maybe like painters tend to like look for, or like really look closely at when they're looking at other painters. But you know, I feel like a sort of more general audience sort of doesn't always know to sort of like look for those things. And so to me, you know, it feels like you're almost sort of teaching people like how painters look at paintings.
yeah, I mean, it's more like maybe a little bit, I don't want it to be like kind of didactic, but like maybe it's sort of like, it's not teaching maybe one to make to make a dish, but to sort of like appreciate the umami of it all, or something like that. You can like try this, you know, you don't know how to come to it, but if you know, you might find that you like it. What I hear more than anything else from people in my life is that like they feel like they're not, you know, they can't understand art, it's beyond them, they don't have the education, it's esoteric, and you know, certainly it can be, but I feel like there's a lot of kind of bullshit gatekeeping or posturing by an establishment that I don't know, that kind of like keeps people out. And like, so, you know, of course people are gonna watch Big Bang Theory instead of like, I don't know, sitting down with a Elizabeth Murray catalog or something like that. But you know, you can have pleasure both ways. And I feel that, I don't know, you could learn how to like something. I didn't know how to look at paintings. Or I knew how to look at a few things. I knew what I liked, and the more I look at, the more I do like. I don't know what it's like for other people to look at work, but I mean, it's deeply pleasurable, and it's a break in a way, in a reset if the work is good, and it kind of like sends me energized back out into the world. It can be bracing. Anyway.
Yeah. I mean, I don't mean to suggest that like that it's done in a sort of didactic way, you know, because I feel like a lot of what or that, you know, that it even is sort of limited to painting, you know, because I feel like a lot of what painters, in terms of like what they're looking at in other paintings, or sort of what really like is the sort of substance of like the attraction, or just sort of these I don't know, these sort of just like very particular and like I don't know how you even to describe it, you know, but just sort of visual experiences that are sort of very particular, and they happen in painting, but I feel like oftentimes they're sort of related to, you know, actual visual experiences that people have in everyday life, you know. So when I look at your paintings, I think about other paintings, but I'm also thinking about like, you know, the way that you know, you might look up at the sky in a moment, or you know, the way that you might like glance at something and like capture like an image of it in that sort of moment, because there's something about it in sort of the way that you're glancing at it, in the kind of like you know, the casual look, or the sort of like you know, I don't know, I just feel like there's a lot of like the visual experience of everyday life that people sort of try to take into their paintings.
I'm interested in how people live with work, if they choose to do so, in how the work holds up. You know, it might look great in one setting, but kind of fall apart after a few weeks, or how it looks, you know, when you're just passing through a room in your peripheral vision, as opposed to sitting in front of it having art thoughts. Yeah. So it has to, you know, it has to make the wall look good. It has to change. It has to stay the same. Yeah, I don't know. It's really got to prove itself. Okay, so we're looking at work.
Yes, hold this one up. Impress purple.
Right. You want me to?
I don't know how do we want to start this? Yeah, I mean, if you have something to start it off with, that would be.
Well, can I ask you like how you see it? Maybe I could respond to your own reaction. You know, this painting is like maybe 20 inches tall. It is kind of like this very light lilac ground with some darker, you know, kind of lavender above it, and just sort of very, you know, you know, usually what happens with the work is I mix up a lot of paint, and I'm gonna, you know, do 2 or 3 things, and like I said, you know, it kind of like pushes back, or something seems interesting or suggestive enough. And, you know, after sitting with it and being sold on it, I sort of, you know, consider it done. And that was the case with this one. This one might have been done a long time before it was documented. And, you know, when it was shown, yeah, I don't know what someone would think about this, but I don't know. I like that I can kind of put my arm in it. I like that there's a lot of air and atmosphere. in it. And I don't know, these compositional elements that are sort of dissipating as I'm looking at them. But I don't know. And, you know, in the titles, you know, are like truly kind of just like oblique. They're not made to suggest anything about the work. They're just sort of like, you know, a little bit of poetry, you know, words that look good or sound good together. And you sort of have to hold the image and the title in your mind at the same time. And titles may be a little bit secondary, but it's not a clue. And maybe it's a little bit, you know, it's kind of like a playful aspect. I think like a lot of people, I went through a period of like not titling the work, of, you know, giving it like numerical, and that seemed like you don't want to, you know, tell people too much about what you're doing. But I felt like if you can just sort of like separate the title from, I mean, like if this was like a, you know, Lavender Nocturne or something like that, maybe it would be like less interesting. But I don't know, like Impress Purple, it's a type of, I can't remember what type of flower it is, but it was just like a great couple of words together, Impress Purple. And I like purple a lot. You know who's like a great purple painter is Jasper Johns. He's got a lot of purple going on, and Johns has been someone who's very, very important to me, I think. Just the attitude and the seriousness. But yeah.
I can throw my little hat to see what you think about the impression that it caused on me. Because I don't know, the first thing that it comes to mind when I see the painting is like you have this kind of low horizontal like space on the bottom that does remind me of the impression of the horizon, obviously. And because you have this atmospheric effect, you have that feeling of like, you know, sort of a landscape, some things going horizontal and things going like vertical, as if it were like lost in the mist, as if things were like lost in the distance. And the other thing that is kind of my antiquarian hat on it is the weird, you know, you see I see the kind of marks on it, the way that you kind of leave the impression of the brushstroke in this, you know, the abstraction that used to be interest and sort of the suggestiveness of like calligraphy or things like that, like Motherwell.
Yeah, I mean, like painting is like a very sensitive form of recording. And it's in a way, it's just sort of like, well, I was here, I did this. I saw the Joan Mitchell show that's up at Werner in New York, and you know, to see to think of her moving in front of these huge canvases and you know, responding and stepping back and you know, smoking in front of them, and just sort of like all the life that's been kind of adjacent to the work, and that kind of goes into the work and informs the work, is I don't know, something that I feel like I kind of have particular access to, where I don't with other art forms. But yeah, I mean, like people are going to come along and kind of like assign visual some sort of meaning or tell a story, and I kind of like that. You know, people say it looks like this or that, and that's pretty cool. Or it gives them a certain idea. I'm like, that's pretty great. It's not for me to say. And I don't know what the work is doing. I'm right in the middle of it. I'm too close to it. I sort of have to decide if it's working or not. And then kind of, you know, you toss it out into the world, and you know, it'll, you know, in digital form, it'll last forever. And people can plug in at some point in the future. Hopefully it sticks around, it stays kind of fresh, or you know, the idea of like a work being generous. I wouldn't say that about my own work, but just the idea of kind of moving energy around, or, you know, even if people have like a negative reaction, that's so much better than like a non-reaction. Just to kind of get the blood going. But yeah, I mean, like horizons, they're inevitable. And I don't know, I've gotten to a place where I'm cool. I'm cool with that. And even like when I first started to look at and make you know, paintings in like the mid 90s, like gestural painting was like totally torched or illegal. You couldn't do it unless it was sort of deployed as critique, or this is ironic, or whatever. Mike Bidlow doing Jackson Pollock or something like that. And I like those paintings a lot. But I guess the way that I wanted to work was a little bit more immediate, and like there was hand in it, and there was, I don't know, whatever else is in there, and to sort of like kind of accept it all. Yeah. But yeah, the history of painting, it's so, you know, it can become kind of fraught and certainly dense. And I like that. I like being part of that lineage. You know, it's an interesting painting to start on. What else do we have?
Yeah. Let's see. Got a few others. See if there's one that you want to stop on.
Oh, you know what? I'm sorry. Could you go back?
Yeah.
That's a Ilse de Hollander painting. It does look like mine. Sorry, I started to put together work of other artists. So, but she is an artist who has been on my mind lately. And yeah, I guess like enough said about that, but she's fabulous. People should look up Ilse de Hollander. You want to go back one or two? Yeah. So I don't know. That painting, it's called Bent Pyramid. I guess there is sort of like a pyramidal shape up there, but I don't know. I mean, like I might have been working on this upside down, and you know, it's a pretty good idea to put some dots sometimes in a painting, and probably like flipped it around a few times, and then it was sort of like, well, you know, this is like a face. That's stupid, but you know, it was just so stupid that I had to, you know, kind of fall in love with it. You know, there's something about the you know, like the rubbing of the painting. I think it was like a blue, you know, ground, obviously, and I think like I was maybe like rubbing the painting on the underside of the desk where I work, so you kind of have this border. Yeah, I don't know, just something about that was attractive to me. I think like there's an idea that like a lot of the paintings are one shot, that are finished all at once. And like, I'm always trying to do that, but those paintings really aren't available to me at the moment. I made some years ago that were pretty good, and that was enough. But yeah, there's, if you could sort of like see the sides of the work, there's always a lot going on in that sort of history of activity on the work, that kind of topography or whatever. You can kind of, you know, study the sediment of it. Maybe that's just the painter in me, but that's something that I'm curious about always, to see the sides of an artist's work.
Oh yeah, definitely.
I don't know. I mean, like, it's hard for me to make a blue painting. Some people have access to blue, and like I feel like they're few and far between. So I was like, well, this is like a nice, I don't know, spacious blue. And yeah, that was fine. I guess I didn't need any more than that. Someone bought this painting recently. I wonder how it'll be for them. I hope it's good.
Yeah, the eyes have that sort of like, what would you call it? That sort of like eternal smile quality of like a Paul Klee angel.
Oh, wow. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, like Klee.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, he's a really interesting artist for me. I don't love all of the work, but more and more, I guess I'm drawn to it. Or someone like Calder, who just seemed like it was I didn't have a taste for it for a long time. It seemed like almost kind of too silly, and I was too serious. But now I'm in a place where I can appreciate Calder. I'm just that mature now. But yeah, clay. I mean, I feel like a lot of my work comes out of drawing, and I feel like there's not preparatory drawings for the work. And I've sort of stopped working on paper, but I do feel like, even to the fact that I'm working on a flat surface on a desk, which I'm looking at right now, and holding the brush in a certain way, it's very much like drawing, and very much about making lines and linear. And maybe lately there's been more of an interest in color or atmosphere, and I've sort of figured some things out about light and dark in a way that I can use them to my own means. But yeah, I mean, it's always drawing, and always sort of just like cartooning, like very, very simple glyphs that it's worked for a long time. So who am I to who am I to rock the boat? Yeah.
Well, I feel like there's something that's not confrontational exactly, but there's I feel like there's something about the simplicity of those kinds of things that it sort of throws the viewer back on themselves and sort of forces them to deal with whatever is in front of them, without, there's not a, I feel like with Clay's Angels, they're just sort of very direct, and they have this kind of, they're sort of deceptively simple, because they really sort of seem to be staring at you, and you don't really understand what the meaning of it is, or why that's there, how they have that kind of hold on you. And I feel like there's something to that in this painting, but to the other paintings as well, that they have this kind of minimal quality that makes it so that you can't really you can't
adjudicate
it in any other way than deal with your sort of visual experience of it, or trying to make sense of it.
Yeah, and you're sort of or at least I'm putting something in front of people where they all have a history of maybe making these forms, and the size is appropriate to a human. It's the size of a tablet, or a magazine or a book or whatever, as opposed to an enormous canvas where it's a little bit, I don't know, maybe you can make big paintings that are intimate, but there's something about I don't know, there's something about smaller work that seems, I mean, it's not transgressive, but I feel like it's more on the level with the viewer, and maybe a little less confrontational. I mean, I love big paintings. I just think a lot of them don't justify their size, or it's just sort of a convention. And I mean, a lot of the, the things that, the work looks in a certain way, it's just sort of born out of circumstance. I don't have a huge place to work. I never worked in a, art studio in school or whatever. So it's, I don't know, maybe if I had, I would be making a different sort of work. I mean, certainly I would, but I don't know. I kind of like to get on the level with a viewer if I can. Yeah, there's something kind of homely about it. There's no great technique. I mean, for a lot of people, Forrest Bess was, for me, really an important figure, and I suppose continues to be. But he's a composition guy, and that you can sort of see how they're made. You could imagine making them yourself. I think there is an artist who's making Forrest Bess paintings now, but he knew when to start, he knew when to stop, and you just don't need anything more than that. And I kind of feel I don't know, if you don't have to be ostentatious, then why bother? If you just be maybe a more immediate, there's that aspect of immediacy again. Yeah, but anyway, it's kind of embarrassing reading into my own work, I feel like.
Yeah,
But I like to talk. I like to talk shop. So yeah.
Well, we're sort of coming up on time,
Mhm.
but I don't know. Maybe there's like one last painting we can talk about it and use that to wrap it
Maybe
up.
that yellow one.
Yellow one, okay.
Yeah, the other yellow one. How about like
Oh.
the brown one?
This one?
Yeah, I think that painting is called Noodles,
Yeah.
which I thought was pretty funny. It's sort of like an example of one that's not not so astringent, and like it is a little bit like, you know, something kind of explosive or propulsive, and there is kind of drawing and there is atmosphere. And I mean, I don't know what else to say about it. I think it's like a 10 by 10 inch painting. It's oil on panel. And I mean, I wouldn't have thought that I would be making this sort of painting 10 years ago, or maybe 5 years ago. But I don't know, I get such a kick out of it. And it's just, but it's sort of like, to put this, you want to go too forward to see that other yellow one where, yeah, okay, so this painting is up in New York right now in a show at Chime and Reed, revolving around the artist Kimber Smith, who's like a great example of someone who didn't overwork, and who, you know, there's this like notion of provisional painting. It just, a lot of room and a lot of air, but sort of like making just like the right decisions and sort of getting out. So a real education for me. Anyway, this is like a painting that I was certainly going to, I think I was like covering up most of it with the white paint and just sort of drawing a little bit. And it just, you know, there was something about the shape, something about the space that opened up. I love when there's like a little bit of architecture, or like just like a, you know, just a squeeze of architecture, just like a little bit of a horizon line. And I don't know, I lived with it. I put it up. I don't usually hang up work in the house, but I lived with this for a while and kind of turned it this way and that. And yeah, I think like in March, like a birthday party, and some friends, some painter friends came over, and they're, you know, we're kind of like asking about that. And I was, you know, I don't know about it, but you know, it kind of stuck around, and it's sort of like been kind of like an important painting for me in this past year. I mean, there's something so awkward about it and kind of off-putting for me. I kind of want to straighten it out. I kind of want to, you know, tweak it. I mean, it's sort of, you know, for what it is, it's perfect. But there's like that kind of imbalance to work that kind of keeps me involved, as opposed to, you know, balance, and I can sort of get out, you know, like the work is fine. It's almost like the work needs you a little bit. It's kind of limping along. It needs a little bit of help. So yeah, and it's just like nice to make like a big yellow shape, right? I was excited to see it in this big, you know, larger gallery that I'm used to showing in, big wall, and it kind of holds the wall. I'm interested in how like a small painting can kind of torque the space around it, and you know, it can feel pretty big. It can make like a big sound, and so that's like what's exciting about this for me. And yeah, it's called Leo. I think I was thinking about like astrology at the moment, and it seemed like, you know, yellow, Leo, it's okay. Yeah, it's like, you know, three letters. That's pretty good. Anyway, and it looks good. The word looks good. So, but I, you know, be mindful of time.
Yeah, that's great. I don't know, Gabriel, do you have any closing thoughts on anything?
No, that was great. I mean, it's very nice to hear you talk about the painting. So
Yeah.
I think
Yeah,
we
thanks
can
for
be on that.
thanks for the opportunity. It's, yeah, it is fun to talk about the work. I appreciate the interest in it. And I appreciate your talking about your own reaction to it. That's useful for me. You don't always know what people are thinking. It's fun when you get to see people looking at things, maybe at an opening or in a gallery. But you know, I don't have that opportunity very often. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Peter. And
you.
yeah, for those of you in LA, you can see Peter's work in a show at Make Room in late January. And I guess if you're in New York, you can see his work at Shyman Reed now.
Correct. Yeah, it'll be up until January 7th. The show's called Regarding Kimber, curated by Jay Gorney. And yeah, go see it. It's great. Go see Kimber Smith.
All right, great. Thank you so much, Peter.
Thank you.
Thank you.